Sports 92.9. Coverage you can count on.
As American forces advance through the Iraqi desert, there are reports of fierce fighting in the north and the south. Tonight, reports of the first casualties of war. 16 American and British soldiers killed in a helicopter crash.
This is an NBC News special report. Target Iraq. Here is John Siegenthaler.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight, the terrible risks of war have hit home. The first coalition casualties, 16 American and British soldiers were killed when a Marine C-Night helicopter crashed in Kuwait. It is the second day of America's second war in the Gulf. 7:35 Friday morning in Baghdad. Other developments now, huge explosions have been reported in the southern town of Basra and the northern town of Mosul. Bombs fell earlier today on Baghdad, doing intense damage. And here at home, the biggest anti-war protest the nation has seen. Thousands of people gathered in Chicago, shut down the city's famous Lakeshore Drive, staging a march in the middle of rush hour. However, at this hour, all of that is overshadowed by the devastating news that 16 American and British soldiers are dead. NBC's Carl Rochelle is at the Pentagon with more on the story. Carl?
John, it's a C-Night CH-46 Marine Corps helicopter believed to be returning from the Iraqi area into Kuwait. It went down. It was not, we are told, enemy fire, that it perhaps was weather-related, perhaps a mechanical problem, conceivably a pilot error. There were 16 people on board. All 16 were killed. Now, the U.S. is only confirming the deaths of the U.S. personnel. The British policy is that they don't confirm the death. But we are told that all 16 on board, believed to be the 4-person Marine Corps crew and 12 British Marines who were on board the helicopter when it went down, all killed in that tragic accident, the first casualties of the war. John, I might point out the CH-46, it's a C-Night helicopter. It's the twin rotor, one on the front, one on the back. It is the standard Marine Corps helicopter for transporting troops on to almost any kind of location. But it's an older helicopter. It's been in the inventory for 30, perhaps even 35 or 40 years. There have been some mechanical problems in the past. They have been taken care of, supposedly, and the Marine Corps has moved forward. They'd like to replace it with newer machines, but not clear exactly how old this particular helicopter was, but we are being told that it did not go down as a result of enemy fire, and apparently not from friendly fire either, mechanical, weather-related, or possibly pilot difficulties. Again, John, all 16 on board, 4 U.S. Marines and supposedly 12 British Marines killed in that crash, John.
We could hear more on this later tonight, but what about the fate of Saddam Hussein? What are they saying about the Pentagon right now?
Well, the Pentagon is saying little about it, but I have talked to government sources about that, and they still say, even at this late hour, that they do not know for sure whether he is dead or alive. These sources said that Saddam Hussein, members of his family, and part of the leadership of the Iraqi military, some of the senior leadership, were in that bunker in Baghdad. They had a pretty good fix on it yesterday when CIA Director George Tenet went to the White House. I'd make that day before yesterday now. Went to the White House and briefed President Bush on it. They decided to target that area. I was told that they hit what they targeted with roughly 3 dozen Tomahawk cruise missiles and bombs, bunker buster bombs from 2 F-117 fighters. They are still having difficulty getting a total readout on who was killed and who wasn't. But I was told that the fact that we saw Saddam Hussein on videotape on Iraqi television is not an indication that he is still alive. John?
NBC's Carl Rochelle at the Pentagon. Carl, thank you very much. And the invasion of Iraq, of course, has begun, the ground invasion. Let's go now to NBC's David Bloom, who's with the 3rd Infantry, well into Iraq. David, generally, can you give us your location?
We can say, John, that we're in southern Iraq. That's about all that we can say. I mean, essentially what happened was around 8 o'clock last night local time, and it's now about 7:40 a.m. here in southern Iraq. We began the movement with artillery strikes. Those were followed by the artillery strikes, I should tell you, were at 2 Iraqi observation posts that they were trying to wipe out so they couldn't get word back to Baghdad as to where this large American force from the U.S. Army's 3rd Infantry Division, 250 tanks, some 20,000 soldiers was coming through. We're literally with the vanguard of this force We're up into southern Iraq now, and other elements of the force are catching up with you. If I can ask my cameraman, Craig White. Craig, if you can pan around now. Craig's going to try to pan around with our camera here, so it might be a little bit herky-jerky on this video phone, but I want to show you what we're seeing out here. As I said, you can see some fuelers, you can see some medic vehicles, you can see Bradleys and Humvees, and you can also see a command and control station here. Basically, we're out at the lead edge of this force, and the other elements of the force are gradually coming toward us, rolling along toward us, and then they're all going to link up out here, and then they'll decide where to go in terms of what route to take to Baghdad based upon the opposition that they face, as well as based upon the possible collapse of the Iraqi regime, if indeed they did successfully target Saddam Hussein. Now, I want to pass on a bit of news to you. What these soldiers are hearing on their radios, and again, I caution, it's just that, what the soldiers are hearing on their radios, is that the 11th Division of the regular Iraqi army has surrendered, has signed capitulation documents, has decided to surrender rather than fight. I mean, we should caution that that is just merely what the soldiers are hearing on the radios. There's no reason to doubt that, but I think what we can say is that it's very possible that this Iraqi armored division, which they did indeed expect to surrender, that they did not expect to fight. Remember, there are 3 regular army Iraqi divisions in southern Iraq. They've been convinced all along that those soldiers, conscripts mostly, did not have the desire to fight this American force, that they would not be the heart of the opposition that they would face. Rather, that's the Republican Guard and the Special Republican Guard. Those are the much more heavily armed forces that are encircling Baghdad. But certainly that would be good news for the American forces if one of those 3 Iraqi divisions in southern Iraq has indeed surrendered. John, back to you.
And David, we're getting the sense that, of course, that you're moving ahead a bit faster with the 3rd Infantry than had been expected. Is this all because the campaign started with the initial attack on the leadership target in Baghdad, and that meant that the ground campaign started a little sooner as well?
I think that there's no question, John, that that's the case, that they moved up the timetable for the ground invasion because not only of the fact that they had this target of opportunity, as the military says, they were calling it the pre-battle phase with these cruise missile strikes on the military leadership targets in Iraq. But in addition to that, because Iraq then responded with the Scud or El Samud missile attacks, and there were the threats of the chemical munitions perhaps being used against these forces in southern Kuwait, the commanders decided it was much better to just push this force into southern Iraq and get the ground phase of this battle going as well.
There's clearly a lot of optimism at the White House and the Pentagon tonight. David, what's the mood of the troops there?
Well, I would say that they're very upbeat for a couple reasons. First of all, because they encountered only light opposition, which is what they expected. Remember, their mission early on was to take out these 2 Iraqi observation posts, each of which contained about 30 Iraqi soldiers. They hit it with artillery first, then about half an hour later, the force that we're in right now stormed across the border, literally the first force to cross into Iraq, and they headed straight for those Iraqi observation posts to make sure that there were, frankly, no Iraqi soldiers there that were still alive. There were infantry forces prepared to engage them in action, but as far as we know, they did not have to do so. They've taken no casualties. At one point, we passed the smoldering remains of these Iraqi observation posts. Again, the critical thing for them was to make sure that the Iraqi soldiers did not relay back to Baghdad the position of this large mechanized infantry force moving into southern Iraq, because that might give away some details of the strategy that these forces plan to employ, because of course there are a number of different routes they could conceivably take heading up toward Baghdad. Now, as to the morale of the forces, it's also bolstered by these reports of the capitulation or surrender, at least that's what we think that it is, of this 11th Division of the Iraqi Regular Army. Well, it was not unexpected. It's still good news for these soldiers. In addition, remember, the 3rd Infantry Division has been here longer than any other forces in the Persian Gulf region. Some of these soldiers have been here now going on 6 months. As we've said repeatedly, they became convinced that the only way to go home was to get their boots and their tanks and their Bradleys into Baghdad. So the fact that this mission is now underway is in some senses a great relief. couple that with the fact that they've faced very little opposition thus far, and they're feeling very good. John?
All right, NBC's David Bloom, who is standing by with the 3rd Infantry Division somewhere in southern Iraq. David, thank you very much. Of course, all of this being watched very closely at the White House. Let's go now to NBC's Campbell Brown, who's at the White House tonight. Campbell, bring us up to date.
Well, John, let me follow up just on what David was reporting. Administration officials earlier today had said that there was some optimism, that there were discussions going on with members of the Iraqi leadership about possible surrender. They were trying not to get too hopeful about this and not really commenting on it beyond that. But one official telling me tonight, there is nothing we would love more than to win this without a major fight. The president is in for the evening, retired to the White House residence. He is getting an evening phone call each night now from Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, giving him updates, as well as his national security advisor, Condoleezza Rice. So we may know more again from White House officials tomorrow as to whether or not this initial strike on the compound where they believe Saddam may have been, along with members of his family, and whether or not these troops are indeed surrendering. I also want to give you reaction, John, to the other issue that Carl Rochelle was reporting about earlier. We've seen the White House tonight really go from a feeling of being pleased with the progress they were making to being a little more restrained with the news of that helicopter crash and the sign of first American casualties in this conflict. The president had nothing public on his schedule tomorrow, but we do know he is planning to meet with congressional leaders here at the White House, and then we'll be going to Camp David for the weekend. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do, in fact, hear him offering some words to the families of those soldiers. John?
Campbell, before we go on, I just wanted to ask you one question about Saddam Hussein and what they're saying about the fate of Saddam there at the White House tonight.
Not a lot, and I think that in and of itself is worth noting because there has been very little information coming out of either the White House, the Pentagon, the State Department, or intelligence sources. All have been unified in being very cautious in their assessment. And I think clearly that signals that this would be such a major breakthrough that they don't want to get out or raise the expectations, I guess, too high or get out too far in front of themselves. So they're being very careful with their assessment. And we may not even know as early as tomorrow, but I think it'll be something for us to closely watch over the next couple of days.
All right. Campbell Brown at the White House. Campbell, thank you very much. We turn now to NBC's Dennis Murphy with more on that chopper crash, the first casualties of this war, and the rest of the day's news in Operation Iraqi Freedom from Baghdad to Washington to Kuwait City.
If yesterday felt like a rehearsal for war, today was the real thing. And tonight, there are real casualties. The first U.S. deaths in Gulf War II. Military officials tell NBC News that a U.S. Marine helicopter, a CH-46 Sea Knight, with 4 Americans and 12 British troops aboard, has crashed in Kuwait during an operation. Reports are sketchy, but it's believed there are no survivors. There were 2 other helicopter incidents today, but no one was injured in those. It was a long day of air warfare. U.S. aircraft carrier teams are working through the night, launching bomber pilots on missions over Iraq.
So they were shooting at us, but they didn't get us today.
Late tonight, there are fresh reports of huge explosions in the sky over Basra, the principal Iraqi city in the south, not far from Kuwait, and also in Mosul, a major oil city to the north, near the Kurd safe haven. Earlier this evening, parts of central Baghdad were burning out of control. A government ministry run by one of Saddam Hussein's sons, a presidential palace, a home of one of Saddam's wives, Republican Guard strongholds, all hit in a brief but ferocious assault from U.S. cruise missiles and 2,000-pound penetrating bombs. Peter Arnett, reporting for National Geographic Explorer and NBC News, described the view from his window as thunderous explosions lit up the night sky shortly after 9 p.m. Baghdad time.
Big explosion near the presidential palace. You will hear those explosions now.
It's the second attack on Baghdad in 16 hours. Missiles launched from sea. Smart bombs dropped from stealth warplanes like this one. U.S. officials said they intend to hit the apparatus of Saddam's Stalinist state like a boxer. Punch hard, step back, pause, and see if it needs another one. It's daylight now in Baghdad, and few people are coming out to look at the devastation wrought so far on pockets of their city. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld said today the big violent display is just beginning.
What will follow will not be a repeat of any other conflict. It will be of a force and scope and scale that has been beyond what has been seen before.
To the south, U.S. Army howitzers slammed shell after shell into Iraq from the Kuwaiti border. And then the ground war was on. U.S. Army and Marine units are in Iraq tonight, pushing north in coordination with British troops. Some forces are coming under light fire. So far, one coastal Iraqi town has been taken. The Iraqis also fired some mortar and rockets to no effect at U.S. troops that haven't moved out yet on the Kuwaiti side. NBC's Dana Lewis with the 101st Airborne joined the soldiers as they put on gas masks, while a horn honked out a warning of another missile attack. Scenes like this were repeated many times today along the Kuwaiti front. The war began yesterday at dawn Iraqi time with the first air raid, a total fake-out, a directed lightning attempt to kill Saddam Hussein and his top leaders. Anti-aircraft fire over Baghdad was followed moments later by an orange fireball at what was described as a target of opportunity. A private home outside Baghdad where electronic intelligence gathering had eavesdropped on a meeting of top-ranking senior Iraqi military, as well as Saddam and possibly both his sons, Qusay and Uday. The compound was flattened by a barrage of cruise missiles and 2 bunker-buster bombs designed to slam into subterranean chambers and explode. A few hours later, Saddam Hussein appeared on tape on Iraqi TV denouncing the president as Bush Jr., a criminal. But some U.S. officials wondered whether the subdued man with the unfamiliar glasses, reading listlessly from a lined pad, was actually Saddam or a double. Tonight, some analysts believe this is Saddam, but think the message may have been taped before the first air raid. So the question remains, is Saddam dead or alive? As U.S.-led forces under the cover of artillery barrages make their way toward Baghdad and provincial cities, propaganda leaflets explaining to the Iraqis how to surrender are being printed and airdropped by the millions. If the Iraqis do make a stand, it is likely, military strategists think, that it will happen in Baghdad, the sprawling city of 5 million people, an ancient capital enshrouded tonight in smoke and paralyzed by a fear it's hard to imagine.
You could hear the air raid sirens in Kuwait City today, where the sun is now just coming up. And NBC's Don Teague is in Kuwait City. Don, first of all, have you had anything like the harrowing experience you had yesterday in Kuwait?
Well, unfortunately, yes. We thought those were basically over for the day, but around midnight last night, Kuwait time, the air raid siren alarms went off again. Everyone went back to the masks, and that was followed by 3 more incidents overnight. So not that you could really sleep well with what's going on in and around this country anyway, but I'm sure there were many, many sleepless nights tonight, as basically every hour was punctuated by air raid alarms throughout this city.
Talk about the precautions that are being taken there if there is a chemical or biological attack.
Well, of course, everyone who has access to them has gas masks like this one. This is the one that a standard issue for NBC. Most of the journalists here from other networks and from around the world have similar equipment, protective gear. As for the city itself, well, there are decontamination centers set up by the U.S. military, also the Kuwaiti military, and some European countries as well, with expertise in decontaminating large numbers of people and equipment if necessary. The major precaution here really is this idea of getting people to shelter, giving them advance warning if there's any sort of missile attack, and telling people to stay indoors and not come out until the all clear has sounded. And fortunately, every air raid siren has been followed by an all clear within a few minutes.
Don, what's the assessment there of the performance of the Patriot missiles when Iraqi missiles were fired into Kuwait yesterday for you?
Well, you know, it's a source of a lot of discussion before all of this happened here in Kuwait. In particular, that was the hope, was that they would provide protection for the 2 million people who live here. That seems to be the case. What the U.S. military is saying is confirming that at least 3 incoming missiles were fired from Iraq. It's still unclear exactly which type of missiles those were, but the military is saying that at least 2 of them were shot down by Patriot missiles. They are confirming that another one of those missiles, the inbound missiles from Iraq, came down in the desert near an area of U.S. troops. We haven't been able to determine if it was shot down or if it came down on its own or perhaps broke apart. But even if it's 2 out of 3, that seems to be better odds than in 1991 when, as we learned after the fact, the Patriots weren't as effective as advertised.
Well, we wish you a quiet day in Kuwait there. Don Teague reporting. Don, we'll talk to you a little later. Now, all day and into the night, we've seen the pictures and the explosions in the skies over Baghdad and heard the sounds of the furious and focused bombing campaign going on there and all across Iraq. What's it like to live through attacks like that? Well, NBC's John Hockenberry has been listening to the voices from Iraq.
A city in night vision green and thunder. To observers thousands of miles away, Baghdad sits under an angry sky tonight, as it did 12 years ago. As they did then, the voices from Baghdad must speak over explosions. Some of those voices are familiar.
Multiple anti-aircraft bursts.
Reporter Peter Arnett, back at his well-known perch atop a Baghdad hotel.
Now we hear the sounds of aircraft low over the city. Aircraft low over the city. Big explosion near the presidential palace. You will hear those explosions now.
But there are other voices from other parts of a nation under attack.
It's a symphony of various sounds.
New York Times reporter Dexter Filkins in southern Iraq, looking for and finding shock and awe.
I was in Afghanistan for the war there, and I have to say that this makes Afghanistan seem almost like a tea party. The amount of firing that's going on here just exceeds that by an order of magnitude. It's just extraordinary.
Reporters in Baghdad like Neil Connery of ITN News watch and wait, seeking safety to witness history.
Then we heard at least 2 explosions, massive explosions. There is a building I can see now still on fire, all floors, flames coming out from all floors of that building.
There's reporter Lindsay Hilsum, who speaks of a city poised and pausing between attacks.
I wouldn't say it was exactly deserted, and I think many people are staying home.
And many of those ordinary Iraqis wondering, is the worst, as the Pentagon insists, really yet to come?
I think people were rather surprised. They thought, oh, this is going to be it. We're going to feel like the whole world is falling down on our heads. But it wasn't like that, certainly not in the center of Baghdad.
But perhaps it was like the whole world falling down to one voice. The mother of all Baghdad voices, Saddam Hussein himself, bunkered down, knowing that every rumble and fiery explosion is looking for him. From somewhere, perhaps near Baghdad, he taunts President Bush. And he insists he hasn't been silenced yet.
As we mentioned, the ground invasion of Iraq has begun in force. Joining us now, Vice Admiral Dennis McGinn, NBC News military analyst. And Admiral, let's start with what we know and what we don't know about this ground invasion.
I think that's really key, John, because what we do know is what we are getting from people on the ground and some television cameras up here in the vicinity of Baghdad, mostly the effects, but not in a detailed way, of some of those strikes by Tomahawk missiles and manned aircraft. What we know is down along the border of Kuwait and Iraq, also reported by people on the ground, embedded journalists, and also from observations from camera gear down there. What we don't know is what's going on out here in the western part of Iraq, what is happening inside the city limits, any other types of special operations force activities. We've got to remember that there are basically 4 campaigns going on. There's a special operations campaign in which covertness is absolutely essential to success. There's an air campaign, which we've talked about quite a lot. the ground campaign, which is getting underway, apparently very successful, down here in the southern part of Iraq, and then finally the psychological operations campaign.
Well, let's talk about the southern part of Iraq there. Are you surprised by the lack of Iraqi opposition?
I'm really not. I don't think the key centers of gravity that the Iraqi regime, such as they are, which that still is uncertain, are willing to defend down here. There's been a lot of discussion about the divisions within the various sections of Iraq, and I believe that the expectation, and appropriately so, was that in the southern part of Iraq there would be the least amount of opposition.
It is sounding again tonight like it's still a possibility that the U.S. may have gotten Saddam Hussein. What do you make of all this?
I think that it could be a possibility, but I think that the commander, General Franks, and his great team out there are going to go with the assumption that the campaign timelines need to proceed as planned. They need to seize opportunity as it presents itself in the southern part of Iraq, take as many key critical nodes of transportation, the city of Basra, for example, communication, and then also to encounter whatever Iraqi resistance there may be. At the same time, continuing the attacks against key leadership, command and control, and communications up in the north.
Seems to be going well.
Absolutely. That's my assessment, John.
All right, Admiral. Thanks very much. We'll talk a little later. Now, it became a household name during the last Gulf War, the Patriot missile. At that time, it was a new and, according to the Pentagon, pinpoint-accurate missile defense system. But it never quite lived up to its reputation. A new and improved version is back. Is it ready for round two? Here's Rob Stafford.
These are the Patriots, designed to shoot down and destroy incoming Iraqi missiles, which might be carrying chemical or biological agents. And today, when Saddam Hussein fired at U.S. troops in Kuwait, the Patriots were called to action. U.S. officials say they hit their targets.
2 missiles have landed in Kuwait this morning.
Yeah, Scud. Okay, we see the Scud.
In the last Gulf War, at first, the Patriot was touted as a stunning success.
42 Scuds engaged, 41 intercepted.
You have to rebuild the house.
Others thought it was not the defender the government hoped it would be. It turned out the Patriot often exploded without hitting its target. It didn't stop missiles bound for Israel. And it was a Patriot that failed to stop the incoming Scud that hit this Army barracks, killing 28 American soldiers. Phil Coyle is the former Assistant Secretary of Defense. He headed all Pentagon weapons testing from 1994 to 2001. He says the new Patriot, which has undergone a massive redesign, is better.
The latest version of the Patriot, so-called PAC-3, is faster than the old Patriot. It's a very fast missile. It has better guidance and control systems than the old one did. And it has a wonderful radar, a very special radar that has great range and resolution power.
Coyle says in testing, the upgraded Patriots hit their targets 45% of the time, but they've never been used before in combat until now.
The war in Iraq came before the Army had completed the test program with real Scud missiles.
How they continue to perform could mean the difference between life and death, not only for the soldiers in the Gulf, but also for the people of Kuwait, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Israel, and Jordan.
Even though the Patriot isn't perfect, it will definitely be better than nothing.
It's Rob Stafford. Now, the State Department got some welcome news from Turkey today, but is it too little too late? NBC News correspondent George Lewis is in Turkey with more on that story. George?
John, Turkey's parliament approved the overflight rights that the U.S. was looking for its planes, so that U.S. planes operating off of carriers in the Mediterranean and out of Europe could fly directly over Turkey into northern Iraq. The question you raise, whether it's too little, too late, remains to be seen. The U.S. progress in Iraq has been so rapid. The question now is, will the approval by Parliament of the Turkish airspace do much good? The answer is probably yes, because what the U.S. needs to do is ferry large numbers of troops into northern Iraq once airfields are secured there so that it can keep the peace. There's been a very tense situation in northern Iraq between the Turks and the Kurds. The U.S. wants troops on the ground to kind of stabilize that situation. John?
Give me an idea of what the mood is in Turkey with regard to the United States, George, now.
We have been talking to a number of people around this town where we are in Diyarbakir, in eastern Turkey and in other cities, and the mood is almost uniform. The Turks do not want war, but now that it's begun, they seem resigned to the fact that Turkey should participate. Turkey has been a long ally of the United States, a 50-year relationship in NATO. The Turks feel that they need to go along with the U.S. on this now that the war has begun.
All right, NBC's George Lewis in Turkey. George, we'll get back to you a little later as well. We have word tonight.